Today on Voice of the Valleys, ladies and gentlemen, Plaid Cymru come out and proudly say that they are an internationalist party and they see no borders in Wales's future. We're going to go over why that should be very concerning to you and why it's extremely dangerous. Speaking of extremely dangerous, ladies and gentlemen, a weapons cache has been found at the migrant camp in Calais, ready to make its way to the UK, and Afghani special forces have potentially been implicated in the small boat crossings. Very, very dangerous indeed. If you think that the small boats are anything less than an invasion at this point, I don't really know what to tell you. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, rounding out the show today, we're going to juxtapose how the fake globalist nationalists in Plaid Cymru speak with how a real nationalist speak in Steve Lawes' recent appearance at the Patriotic Alternative Conference. All that and more today on Voice of the Valleys. Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Voice of the Valleys yet again with your host, friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, always satirical unless it's not, because everything nowadays is being branded as far-right, in any way moderately conservative, or even to the left of the centre, with how ludicrously far to the left the absolute retards have gone that you get called far-right. Labour are being called far-right by many people nowadays. Put that in perspective, ladies and gentlemen, or at least right-wing. Labour have seen being called by people on the very, very far left that they're being called right-wing. Yeah, make that make sense. Mr. George Cresswell, hope we're all doing well. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever we are. So, recorded this yesterday, but it was very long, very rambly, and kind of crap. So, there's a lot of things that I spoke about yesterday I'm not going to have a chance to speak about today. I've been out of the loop at the moment with the internet being down and just having lost my, regular sort of upload schedule with these things. As you know, it's been a lot of clips just from past podcasts going up on the channel at the moment, but they should hopefully be out later on today, provided no internet hapsies occur. And many, many internet hapsies have occurred today, particularly with uploading stuff to a software which I use to generate transcripts and chapters and so on. Speaking of, a recent interview I done, which is going to be coming up very, very soon, is a very, very important one. However, you guys on the memberships in Locals, Patreon, or in Tier 2 and above, you will be getting it early access. However, for this person, there was no questions that were going to be asked of them by the audience because they agreed to sit down with me before I ever came up with those membership areas. So you will be getting it on early access, but I thought it would be unfair, especially with the nature of the conversation that we had, to then spring this membership stuff on them. As you'll see, it's a very, very tragic story, but a very, very important one we'll be going through. Not only that, conversation with Justine Winter is all recorded and it's in the editing stages, ladies and gentlemen. Very, very important conversation, especially for those who comment, particularly on the bits that I've done recently with regards to Councillor George Carroll, where he stood his ground on the small boat issue. And people were saying, oh, well, you don't have small boats arriving in Wales. What's the problem? You're going to see, ladies and gentlemen, how it is very, very much so a connected problem. Even nationalists are realising, or separatists, if you want, will say that it is a massive problem because we are landlocked together. You will see from when I asked the question of Justine quite late on in the interviews, as the interview will be coming out hopefully very, very soon, how it's very easy to go from small boat or from somebody coming in completely documented or undocumented, getting into one of these communities where they're doing all these wig swapping and badge swapping and uniform swapping. The next thing you know, they're in the hotels taking care of your loved ones when they're most vulnerable, and they're not trained, they're not documented. The NHS and all the trusts know about it, and there's a clear chain which we describe of how people go from boat to bedside, and it's very, very terrifying indeed. Stay tuned for that. So if you think that just because boats aren't arriving in Wales that this isn't a massive problem, it absolutely is. Ladies and gentlemen, the legal immigration, quote-unquote legal immigration, because I don't think there really has been a legal immigration, ever since Tony Blair threw up on the floodgates in 1997, if you ask me, potentially even further back then with the Windrush generation and all the rest of it. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. And illegal immigration, obviously how it plays into the rogue nurses and all of these other things. Right, just going to adjust my microphone 2 seconds. I can see it clipping over a little bit because I've got a lot of energy today. But as you would have seen, so I re-recorded this because now more things have come to light, and I wanted to go over these things because Plaid Cymru have put their globalist ambitions on full display in a recent conference. And there's been so many examples. It's just like almost fallen into my lap over the last few days where I've been gathering this information, gathering these clips and all of these other things that, it's like gifts from God, if you will, of all of these different stories of what would happen if we didn't have borders, if we didn't have strict border controls, and the exact vision that Plaid has for Wales. Plaid are anti-Wales. And obviously, if you followed this channel, if you followed this podcast, you'll know this by now. And I don't take any pleasure in saying it. I'd love to say that they're for Wales, but they're not. They're fake nationalists. And they say it because they openly said, the leader of Plaid Cymru, who has me blocked because I called him a liar when he was exposed on his lies on X, right? And as you know, the Plaid Cymru, one of their representatives, called me a dog on social media because I dared question their nation of sanctuary with their own representatives' words, mind you. That's literally the only comeback they have because they know that they are lying to the Welsh public at every single turn when they say that they are for Wales, right? They went up on stage recently. Rhun up Iorweth went up on stage recently in Swansea at their conference and said, we are proudly internationalist, not even nationalists. They claim to be nationalist, right? And that's why I say they're not nationalists, they're separatists, right? They're separatists because they want to separate us from our sister nations, right? And take Wales back into the EU. Take us back into the EU bureaucracy, technocracy, because they'll get more power that way. You know, even migration pacts and all the rest of it. So no nationalist, no true nationalist, as you'll see when we juxtapose this is what Steve Lowe said at the Patriotic Alternative Conference recently. We'll juxtapose how the two of them speak. Here's what Rhun up Iorweth had to say. We are proudly internationalist. Where there is suffering, we see no borders. Again, basically what defines suffering nowadays. If you ask me, the Welsh public is fucking suffering a lot with the wage diminution due to illegal immigration and other things, due to the massive overtaxing, due to the massive overbearing government structure. More people would like, to be able to own their own businesses and have less taxes and all of these things to actually prosper, right? No government is talking about doing the actual thing that would help a lot of people, which is being less government and actually fostering pro-family structure, fostering people to have their own businesses and all the rest of it. No, because they want you trapped in a state system. That's why none of these initiatives which the government will push will never be like, let's scale back the size of government. Let's scale back the size of the public sector. No, because they want more and more and more and more, ever more of the good taxpayers' money until the good taxpayers will leave because they don't want to pay so many exorbitant fucking taxes anymore. And then who's left to pick it up? The people that were under them. Like, somebody's got to pay for it. And it's not going to be the lofty politicians with their 70 to 100 grand, whatever it is a year, salaries that are going to pay for those things, right? It's you. It's off the backs of the good Welsh man and woman. Here's what Rhun up Iorweth had to say at his recent conference.
That is who we are as a party. Proudly internationalist. We see no borders where we see suffering. Let us continue to ask proudly, what can we do to help? Not where are you from? So whilst the Prime Minister continues to pander to reform's backward populism, Plaid Cymru will take no part in their race to the bottom, because that's a race without a winner. We don't have to live in a society in which the asylum seeker, forced to get by on £10 a week, is scorned.
So it was cut off a little bit there. So it was the Senedd Waste page on X that posted that clip. It says a lot. We are proudly internationalists. So we're not for Wales. We're not for Wales because nationalists would be worse. If they were just for Wales, right? If they were the party of Wales, then they would say that they're pro-Wales, or they are nationalist, right? But they don't say it. At least in that instance, they're being honest, but they're hoping that you don't notice, ladies and gentlemen. They're hoping that they're not going to think about what that actually curtails, right? It's literally them saying, we are for everyone else around the world but you, pretty much. We are focusing on the rest of the world and what we can seemingly do for the rest of the world, right? Not what we can give to you as Welsh good and people, what you have to give to the rest of the world. I'm sorry, we don't know the rest of the world fucking anything. We don't know the rest of the world fucking anything. And that's where, I get this, people tout this lie on the left all the time, saying, oh, the asylum seeker has to get by on £10 a fucking week. Ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, if everything else was taken care of, your hot water, your accommodation, your food, etc., if you were posted up in one of these hotels and you had a safe place to go to every night, you had a nice warm bed, nice warm meal, potentially 3 meals a day, buffet food, enough to where people coming out from these hotels that worked in them say they waste it, they are disrespectful enough to say they don't fucking want it, that this food is shit. Could you survive on £10 a week? Phone is paid for. All other amenities, electric, gas, all paid for. Right? Could you get by on £10 a week? Of course you fucking could. Fact of the matter is that £10 a fucking week, supposedly, is a fucking gift. It's a gift that they're not fucking owed as far as I'm concerned. I've seen others say they get by on like £48 a week. Yeah, it's quite easy to get by when everything else is fucking paid for you. Does anybody not take that basic train of thought to the next logical point? Well, hang on, everything else is being paid for them. They don't have to pay for their own gas, their own electric, their own phone bill, all of these things, the clothes, right? They don't have to pay for any of that shit. They don't have to pay for mortgage. They don't have to pay rent. Everything's paid for by the fucking taxpayer. So yeah, you can get by. You could survive on £10 a fucking week. You could survive on £0 a fucking week when everything else is fucking paid for you. So let's just get rid of that right off the bat. Let's just get rid of that right off the bat. Hoping you'll feel sorry for these people. They're hoping you feel sorry for these people. All these, you know, down on their luck, military-age men coming over and doing heinous things to women, heinous things to young girls, right? That are flaunting what they are being given by the government in their face, literally pissing back in the face of the people whose weak-ass government is putting them right in the fucking firing line of, right? All while lecturing them on how racist and xenophobic and how underprivileged these people are. Yeah, we have it quite good compared to the rest of the world. That's why we should aim to keep it that way. We should aim not to take it for granted and not to give it away to everyone else in the fucking world who quite dearly, based on the testimony we've seen from people inside hotels, for example, they have no respect for it anyway. We have respect for our culture and what our ancestors built because we know how hard they had to fucking work for it. We know they weren't privileged in the way that there is. Our ancestors weren't privileged when they were dying down in the fucking coal mines, getting black lung and all the rest of it. Right? That's the lie that we've been sold. That's the lie that we've been sold. So we'll give everything away because the state has everything to benefit from it. But what did he say? We see no borders where we see suffering. Let's talk about suffering, shall we? Would Run Up Iorweth want to bring this lady to the forefront, who, it's a case of America. This is one example. We're going to go through a lot of examples now about what this means, ladies and gentlemen, where we see no borders, where we see suffering, or whatever. This is one of many cases. Names come to mind. Lake and Riley, for example, is a big one. I can't remember the other lady's name. Another young girl. Irina Zarutska was more restorative justice, but you had Lake and Riley, for example, who was one of the young girls that was murdered by an illegal migrant, illegal alien. Can't remember exactly where he was from, but he's from Latin America, I believe. You have this case now. We've seen people have been up in arms about Haitians in their communities, eating the dogs, eating the cats. Well, we have an American woman here by the name of Jenny. Her identity has been, kept anonymous per her request. She has an absolutely heinous story. There's an illegal alien from Haiti, somebody by the name of Junior Joseph, brutally raped and beat her, breaking her jaw, nose, and multiple facial bones, knocking out her teeth until he thought that she was dead. He then took her back after beating her, right? After beating her in the street, right? Took her back to this house and was raping her. And when she woke up, because she wasn't dead, as he was raping her, then beat her some more and is alleged to have urinated into her broken nose and jaw. And somehow she managed to crawl for help as her face was hanging off by the skin. This is a 14-minute video, which will be linked down below, ladies and gentlemen. We're not going to go through all of it. But here's this American woman recounting her experience, that this is what, ladies and gentlemen, our, likely next leaders in Plaid Cymru, right, because they'll form a coalition to try and keep reform out, and I don't like reform, as you'll know. This was in early 2024. This is what would be encouraged. Human trafficking, child trafficking, human smuggling, people smuggling, whatever you want to use, all encouraged under open border policies, right? It's all encouraged. Because it's so easy for humans to be trafficked when there's no barriers in the way. Funny how that works, isn't it? Funny how borders then operate as a good control against human trafficking, or would in theory operate as a good control against human trafficking. She's still undergoing surgeries to repair the physical damage that he caused, which obviously the mental damage and the emotional damage will likely stay with her for the rest of her life. This is obviously early 2024. This was under Biden's open border regime that let however many millions of illegal aliens in from, frankly, just the worst places on the planet. Look at this, read this story, or listen to this testimony in a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Understand, this is what Plaid's vision, this is what would be part of Plaid's vision for Wales.
Just the way. I was visiting the beach on spring break, and it was my first time there, and I had gone out with a friend, and we had gotten into a little bit of an argument, and I ended up departing from her vehicle and she drove off. As I was making my way down a street, I was confronted, and that was just about the last thing I remembered. A man began to beat me. He knocked me on the ground, and he beat me in the head. And that's when my arm broke because it was protecting my eyes. And I knew in that moment I was going to die. He's kicking me in the head. He's stomping on my head, and I black out. I kind of was going in and out of consciousness at that point, and I remember kind of being carried by him over his shoulder. And I looked, and my arm, the bones were sticking out, and I blacked out again. I woke up in a house, and he was on top of me. He was raping me and beating me. When he realized I came to, he beat me in the head again, and I blacked out. And then I remember just thinking, I thought I had died. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was happening. I remember looking at him and thinking, I don't know you. And
Why would you, right? She's obviously not gonna know him, but guy that should never have ever been in the country in the first place. Guy who background checks been done, right? They had tried to expedite this, into the country. In America, in this instance, all of our Western nations, right? The thing that makes it slightly different is a lot of people that were implicated in the grooming gangs and stuff like that, they come here legally. They haven't come here across the small borders. I say legally, right? Because there is no legal. I think you go back to, 2010, the conservative administration, successive conservative administrations with the, decade and a half in power. There's no such thing as legal immigration with what they did. Right, they instantly broke the promise that they made, which was to return it to pre-1997 levels, or I think it was around the levels of the 80s and the 60s. What it had been regularly up until that point, which still would have resulted in gradual replacement. Obviously, just would have been a lot slower. Just would have been a lot slower. And that's simply because, I'll bring it up, ladies and gentlemen, we're dying societies. The reality is that we're dying societies. Would have been completely prevented with a strong border. This is, Plaid want to welcome this because, Haiti, one of the areas of the world that is one of the worst places to live in. There's a lot of suffering going on in Haiti, a lot of gang violence, because they do a lot of voodoo rituals and all the rest of it. It's not a place that you really want to go. It's funny how Conan O'Brien, when Trump was saying that a lot of these places are shitholes, he was in Haiti and saying that Haiti is always, I think, I can't remember, it might have been Haiti, whatever country it was. If I'm wrong about this, check it down below. He said something about Haiti had always been beautiful, and he was about 150 to 200 meters off the coast, and not another person in sight. And Stephen Carter was making the joke, saying that, oh yeah, waiting back on the shore for him is a Haitian guy with a 2x4 with a nail in it. You know what I mean? Because that's the way it is out in these countries. But maybe should have a look at what's going on out there, and the fact that there's people that make those countries, right? The countries that have been made across the world tell a story of the people that made them, right? When we look at Haiti, when we look at these other places, maybe we should be like, maybe those other areas and those peoples aren't so compatible with us, and maybe bringing them in would be a direct threat to our people's safety. That's absolutely the case. That's absolutely the case. But our governments, Wales, England, Scotland, all of them, are so keen to capitulate because they want the political benefit. Namely, chief of which will be that they'll give these people the right to vote, and we will be outvoted, particularly by people that come here from other areas where they have multiple wives, very, very big families, large voter bloc, whilst we are a dying society. Let me give you an example, ladies and gentlemen, before I go over this next bit, where a child in a school in Swansea, which is the Islamic capital of Wales now, it seems, was told by a representative from a local mosque that came into the school to give an unannounced lesson on Islam, which the parents were not told was going to happen. He said that, "I don't pray to Allah, I'm Christian." And the chilling response from this representative, which is a threat, make no mistake about it, ladies and gentlemen, it is a threat, as we'll go over in a moment. He said that by year 6, you'll all be Muslim. That's what this representative of the mosque said. But let's go over it first. We're a dying society. Take an example of Swansea, right? And this is why biggest things that we haven't done ourselves any favours in this regard with the rise of feminism and the amount of people that we slaughter inside the womb every single year, right? Which I believe for us in the UK is in the 200,000, about 215,000 last I checked per year. There's about 800, by some estimates, I've seen some people say online, my generation, there's about 800 to 900 million people that should be here living that are not living, that were denied their right to life. 800 to 900 million people. Now, take this for example, ladies and gentlemen. Population in Wales, according to Swansea Gov, and I'll bring this up on screen in a moment. This is the section down below where it has the population in Wales. In particular, I'm going to move myself just out of the way a moment before I switch over. So, have a look at this, ladies and gentlemen. Tell me what you see. Tell me what you see. For mid-2024, the population of Wales was estimated at about 3.187 million, right? That is smaller than Los Angeles. Now, Los Angeles is the second biggest city in the United States by population, right? The entire country of Wales population, right, has a, somewhere in between the second and third biggest cities in America. So why should we be forced to take care of the entire fucking world? Why should we be forced to take care of tens of millions of Afghan women? First off, are not our problem. And I get it. It's not great. It's not a great place to live. But it's not our fucking problem. But B, we're so small. We're so small, but do you want to know why, Alicia? It doesn't take much to replace us. We're very small. We're a very distinct population. It doesn't take much to replace us. Remember, all you got to do is get a majority in each of these counties of people that will vote for the establishment, in addition to those who already have. So you only need a very small number of people that will come in and vote the same way, and you have the one-party state that they want. You have the one government state that they want. But check this out. It went up a little bit, but what happened to the negative natural change? What happened to the natural change? It decreased. Around 8,100 fewer births than deaths in Wales. We are dying. The Welsh people are dying. We're dying out because of our own liberalism, because we won't have children. We won't have strong family structure, right? That's because of the feminism that has been ingrained in this. It said, to have any kind of family structure, good family structure with the male as the head of the family, the spiritual head, right? And have the family oriented towards a higher good. That's evil. Feminism deifies women and makes them gods over men. Right? Why do you think that transgenderism is a logical outcrop of feminism? Because they went from saying we are equal to men to we have to be men in order to be validated in that way. And again, it's an affront to what would be divinely appointed patriarchal order. But anyway, the increase in mid-2023 to mid-2024 has been mainly driven by increase in net international migration to the tune of around 22,700. Net internal migration also added around 4,800 to the Wales population over the year. And I can only imagine that is, ladies and gentlemen, from people who move to areas like mine. Do you want to know what happens, ladies and gentlemen? A lot of people whom I've spoken to, or some people whom I've spoken to, that have moved to communities like mine. Do you want to know why they move to escape big cities like Bristol, like as people on my street that I've spoken to have moved from Bristol? When I asked them why, one of the biggest reasons was because of the crime. Funny enough, that's only happened more and more and more. As Bristol and all the big cities, Birmingham, as Robert Jenrick recently pointed out, as Cardiff and Swansea and London, where the native English person has been ethnically cleansed from. They move to areas like mine to escape those areas. So you have people there moving, for example, regular British people, moving to areas like mine. This is the thing. What happened when the bombs were falling in World War II? People sent their children away to areas like mine. areas like mine in the countryside and in the valleys where there's natural protection and where they're going to be a lot safer because cities are a big target. Right? So they send them away to areas like mine, and people are now exodusing big cities because they're fleeing to areas like mine. And then Plaid want to turn the entire country into like one of those big cities because they have a lot to gain from it politically. So you're always going to think about, ladies and gentlemen. Think about it in terms of the political gain that your politicians have to gain from the increasing influx of votes. That if you think that these people are going to come into the country and not vote for the people that allowed them to come in and have this better life that they see it as, right? You think that it's quite shocking what happened in America recently is kind of saying that because America has seen what it's like under the Democrats. A lot of the immigrants have seen what it's like under the Democrats, and that the policies that the Democrats were implementing actually affected them negatively as well. So Donald Trump ended up making the biggest gains with black men that any Republican had seen in a long time, Latinos especially. Funny how then the tolerant left and the suicidally falling on their sword for these immigrants left turns on those same immigrants when they don't vote the right way, when they don't play into their savior complex, right? But what's another thing now, ladies and gentlemen? As I mentioned, here's that story from Patrick Christie's where in a Welsh school in Swansea, in, what was it? It's a Seaview Community Primary School, as I mentioned. A representative from a local mosque went in and told these children, by year 6, you'll all be Muslim. If you're a parent in the UK, and odds are your child will be in public schools, that's pretty much the only option a lot of people have. Make no mistake, this is by design. And this is a threat. This is a threat to you, a threat to your children, and I'll explain to you why in a moment.
GB News can exclusively reveal that a Welsh primary school has been slammed after worried parents were branded racist for raising concerns about an Islam lesson. Let me explain. Seaview Primary School in Swansea recently brought in a representative from a local mosque to teach the school children about Islam. But parents complained that Christian denominations don't get the same representation in their religious education lessons. Apparently, parents were not informed about the visits beforehand, and then when some objected to the lessons, they were apparently made to feel as though they were racist. Children were being marked down on things like misspelling mosque or Quran. But there is a bit more to this. There is even the claim that one of the children said, I'm Christian, I don't pray to Allah, and that the person who came in to that school to give that talk and to be with the children said that by the time you hit year 6, you will all be Muslim. Well, local Reform UK councillor Francesca O'Brien.
Right, you can go and check out the rest of that clip link down below. You can go check out the full GB News segment if you want. That is a threat. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen. That is a threat. That is saying convert or die. Convert or die, or convert or be enslaved. The same way, ladies and gentlemen, I think you might be able to, if I dodge out the way, there you go. If I move my chair out the way slightly, to this way. Right there, if you're looking on screen, right there. That book, right there, which I'm pointing to. It's called The Last Girl. It's called The Last Girl. It's written by Nadia Murad, a survivor of the Yazidi genocide. Now, she was taken as a sex slave by ISIS, right? She has a really, really tragic, harrowing story, which broke down as part of a members-only video in full. Now, you can get some extracts of it on YouTube if you're just a regular viewer and on Rumble, etc. You can get more clips and more things, extracts from it on early access if you go over to Locals Patreon and the Tier 2 membership. Tier 3 of the YouTube is where the full video is. If you go over, because they're the same price, right? Because they're the same price on Locals and on Patreon. If you're going over there, the full video will be located in there for you as well. Now, there's going to be more extracts of that coming out over time, right? Coming out over the rest of the course of this month, going into the end of the year, right? But do go check it out if you haven't done so already. It's a harrowing story, but there's a lot of things in there. We don't just read you the book, ladies and gentlemen. I don't just read you the book. There's many themes in there which we discuss as well. 4 key ones in particular, and there's another one which I wanted to write about as well, but I've forgotten about it. I've forgotten what it was. Which I will. Oh yes, I've just remembered what it is. In fact, I'm going to make a little voice note in a moment, ladies and gentlemen, off the record, so that I can remember what it is. Okay. Oh, sorry, my mic massively clipped over the limit there for a moment. Yes, so stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen, for that coming up in the near future. So, just shared there is a veiled threat, because what is it, ladies and gentlemen, about Islam that makes it so dangerous? Right, well, let me read you this. Some people are really shocked to find this out when I share this with them, and I've not read the Quran from cover to cover. I don't intend to, because I actually value my life. I actually value my life, and I don't want to do penance, right, unnecessarily, particularly with reading that. But there is an important, that's why I appreciate people that have read it and do talk about it a lot. For example, I believe Raymond Ibrahim he speaks on it a lot. Robert Spencer, David Wood, Ridvan, or I think it's Ridvan, I don't know how to say it, but the apostate prophet, right? Obviously, he's a ex-Muslim himself. What happens first, and this is what they were confronted with, the Yazidis were confronted with, when ISIS took over the village of Kocho, they said to them, you have 3 days to convert to Islam or suffer the consequences, and they insinuated they probably first have to pay jizya, and then what happened was they were taken to the local school in Kocho, the men were slaughtered and dumped into a mass grave, and the women were taken to Mosul and other places to be sold on the slave markets, right? For the use as, sexual slave housewives, if you will. That's basically what they were used for. Where does this come from? So, for example, all you got to do is go on to Quran.com, Quran.com, and you can get this. You can read this, the verses 928 to 929, and it actually breaks it down for you. Now, this is one thing here. The order to fight people of the scriptures until they give jizya. Jizya being a quote-unquote protection tax, but people don't realize it's more and more of a cuck tax. Right, it's you acknowledging that you are, in fact, a second-class citizen, basically, or second-class person, a dhimmi, right? This is why Allah compensated Muslims for their losses by the amount of jizya that they took from the people of Dhimma, right? The lower class, if you will. So have a look on screen here, ladies and gentlemen, where it says, the order to fight people of the scriptures, that means Christians and possibly Jews. They sometimes refer to them as different names, but people of the scriptures tends to refer to Christians until they give jizya. Fight those who do not believe in Allah, nor in the last day, nor forbid that which has been forbidden by Allah and his messenger, and those who acknowledge not the religion of truth among the people of scripture until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves subdued. That's the key point there, ladies and gentlemen. Willing submission and feel themselves subdued. That's what you're seeing. This is not just a regular, just tax or whatever, or some nice payment. Oh, thank you for your protection. No, this be like, we will do whatever we want to you. Pay us so we don't, right? We'll come in, we'll rape your daughters, we'll rape your wife and all the rest of it. We'll kill you. Pay us so we don't, right? That's what it is. Because if you go down a little bit further, ladies and gentlemen, paying jizya is a sign of kufr and disgrace. It literally says it. If they choose not to embrace Islam, with willing submission in defeat and subservience. Subservience, ladies and gentlemen. This is our land, and this is what these people want to bring to us. And make no mistake, they don't even lie about it. Disgraced, humiliated, and belittled. Do you want to be disgraced, humiliated, and belittled and subservient to these disgusting foreigners in the name of a foreign religion in your own home, ladies and gentlemen, in your own homeland? I would think not. I would think not. If you don't want that, congratulations. You're on the same side as somebody who's been branded as far-right, fascist, the Antichrist, and all manner of different other things, right? Well done. You've joined the club. You might not agree with me on everything, but you should at least understand the threat that this poses. And make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, the sectarian groups have been building in the UK for a long time now. The reason why, on the NHS, we have wards. We have wards to deal with the consequences of things like cousin marriage and inbreeding. Right? And female genital mutilation. Not only that, they openly say they want to come here and take power. Right? They openly say it. Because Humza Yousaf, right, or Humza Useless, as some other people call him, the ex-First Minister of Scotland, right, the one who's a flagrant anti-white racist and anti-British, right, disgusting colonising foreigner, who I can't wait to see remigrated back home, has founded, or at least been a co-founder, of something called the Muslim Impact Forum. And they say openly they want Muslims at every level or at the very top level of the British government. and every level of society. Obviously, they want to be head teachers in schools. They want all the schools to be Islamic, which is why that education secretary, what's his name, Hamid Patel, I believe his name is, would never, ever, ever should be happening. You wonder why you have people going in from the local mosques to our schools and telling our children, "Oh, don't worry, you'll be converting to Islam by the time you're in year 6." And then you look at the education sec, and it's like, or one of the leaders of education in the UK, and it's like, I wonder why. I wonder why. You look at the Home Secretary, right? You look at the Deputy Prime Minister, ever since Angie Rayner's gone, right? Probably to buy another home. You look at the Home Office, and you see that there's nearly a British person in there. You think, maybe that's why Britain has so many problems. That's how the rest of the world sees it, make no mistake. The rest of the world sees everything we're doing now as just absolutely deliberately cucking ourselves for no good fucking reason, right? And they think it's humiliating. J.D. Vance making the jibe that Britain is going to be the first Islamic country that's nuclear armed, right? Even though Pakistan already has nuclear weapons. But anyway, you see the sentiment. You see people sharing memes, that the iconic one of Putin raising the glass, and it says, "As they say in England, Allahu Akbar," or "As they say in England," and then it's just some Arabic text. Because we have road signs that are written in Arabic and Urdu and all the rest of it in many areas of England now. This is colonization. And I appreciate you guys. I know I'm preaching to the converted a lot, or preaching to the choir even. But I appreciate you guys who share this, and I hope you'll share this, because this is a target on your back, and your politicians are exploiting you and sacrificing you and your children and every future generation that's going to come on this altar. And even the older generation that somehow still don't see it, right? Even though they're the ones that have had certain benefits, pensions, etc., taken away from them. One of the things we talked about with Justine was how the government's even pushing through this euthanasia legislation like there's no tomorrow, right? At a time when it comes to having to pay people their pensions for all their lives, right? For all their lives' work. Funny how that works. Government take from you all across your fucking life. When it comes time to pay you back, would you rather just die? Funny how that works, isn't it? But we're all going to die soon enough, unless we take this threat seriously, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Humza Yousaf and whoever the other guy is. I don't care about who he is. I don't care to learn his name or anything like that. Literally saying that we need Muslims, and we need everything to be made in Britain for the betterment of Muslims, right? Which would directly make it worse for every other religious minority, many just non-religious people included in that, mind you. They don't care whether you're religious or you're not, ladies and gentlemen. They just care whether you're Muslim or not. That's all they care about, right? This is what they have to say, and how they're saying we need more people like Humza Yousaf, and we need more people, Muslims, in top areas of government.
I would say hand on heart now that we are at a tipping point in this country, and it's reflected in other countries as well, where we either try and do something different to try and self-organize Muslims, to represent ourselves better, to use our resources better, and to influence the countries that we live in better than we have done already. Brother Humza is a relatively rare and unique political talent. Actually, we need many more people like him at the top of government, in every government, in this country, across the 4 nations, and in other governments, that can influence, sit at the top table and make a difference on behalf of the Muslims. I would say hand on heart.
Now you can see the clip got cut off there. The clip got cut off there, but the sentiment was there, make it better for the Muslims. That's what you're seeing there, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just limited to one nation. They're saying all 4 nations, and they say it specifically. They say it specifically, ladies and gentlemen. So they're talking about what we can only assume. And again, not for political purposes, but just for the purposes of it being one big landmass, right? Even though there's obviously a lot of conflict that goes on when you start to say between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and how it relates to Great Britain in terms of the monarchy and the troubles, etc. But they're seeing it, seemingly, don't care for our native troubles, right? Don't care for our conflicts that we've had between people of these isles, right? That don't want to be part of certain political institutions and monarchies, etc. Right? There's a lot of history between us as peoples that go back that far, right? They don't care about that. They see it as Wales, England, Scotland, and Ireland, the island landmass. They don't care about there's a distinction between Ireland and Northern Ireland there, by seemingly. And here they go. We can try something different. Quite clearly, the terror attacks haven't been working, so now they've had to exploit the political system, and it's been largely successful with overwhelming amounts of politicians bending over backwards for these people, bending over backwards, usually foreigners bending over backwards for more foreigners in the interest of foreign interests and foreign people. And the people are sick and tired of it. That's why you see people rising up. That's why you see people now being branded as far-right, Islamophobic, racist, all of these things, because it's all these people have left. Because they see what is right in front of them. They see what is right in front of them. When they say self-organize, ladies and gentlemen, now, think Muslim Defense League. Think those guys that went out with weapons and the guys that you see that are going to hunt down, quote-unquote, members of the EDL with AK-47s on our soil, right? So you might disagree with those people's politics. They're British people like you and me, right? And obviously there's a specific set of people I'm speaking to there. I understand that, there's people that watch this content, even as far as New Zealand, people have commented on my content, which I greatly appreciate. Thank you. I understand you guys are going through similar troubles, right? Same thing's going on in Australia at the moment. America, obviously, all across Europe, we're all, as native peoples of these isles and of other native countries, in this fight together. It's not just Muslims, it's against their own politicians that want to bend over backwards. But think of these rampaging marauders dressed in black, balaclavas with weapons, going through, terrorizing communities in the wake after the Southport incident, the Southport terror attack, right? The Southport riots that occurred and people went to prison for and all the rest of it. By the way, alarming audio came out recently. In fact, I will try and find it whilst I'm here, ladies and gentlemen. Extremely alarming audio came out recently that outright confirms, not sure where it is from, but outright confirms that these people that went to jail in the aftermath of the Southport riots, they were arrested and deliberately put on blocks with Muslims to basically be sacrificed. It makes you think, did Peter Lynch actually kill himself? I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe there's been a full autopsy done that I haven't seen. Information on X is widely shared, and people say all kinds of different things. Right? The media. We can't trust the media to report things accurately for the most part anymore. Right? Which is quite funny. Speaking of the media, I was going to bring this up a little bit later. The inquiries revealed that Axel Rudakabana brought a knife to school on 10 occasions, requested images of severed heads, and described the 2017 Manchester Arena attack as a good battle. And Adnan Hussein, who I have to bring up later as a point of credit to him, had the gall then to come out when that bogus BBC article came out and said that he wasn't a quote-unquote Islamist or whatever. Can we get an apology? I then quoted him and said, no fucking apology, and here's why. And I was completely fucking right, it seems. You want me to believe, as in the BBC and Adnan and all the rest of them, that Axel Rudakabana wasn't an Islamic terrorist when he had all of the material there. He had the BBC article still admitted he had the Al-Qaeda terrorist training manual, or the book that was deemed as affectionately termed, euphemistically, I probably should say, as the Al-Qaeda training manual. He had rice in enough to kill the entire fucking community. Went in with a particular goal to kill a certain subset of people, right? These young girls that were at his Taylor Swift dance class, right? And he described the 2017 Manchester Arena attack as a good battle. You want me to believe that an Islamic, that someone who's not an Islamic terrorist would describe, someone who's an anti-Islamist, you said, would describe the 2017 Manchester Arena attack as a good battle. Go absolutely fuck yourself. I can't wait for Remigration Airlines to take him back as well. And all of their families. Obviously, I can't wait for Remigration Airlines to liberate entire communities. But here's the audio that came out, ladies and gentlemen. Believe it might be somebody that worked in the prisons or whatever. Peter Lynch's inquest is this month, so I will see what happens because of that. This is the audio that came out. It was recently posted on X, saying that they were put away for the riots. These people that were put away for the riots and deliberately put in a place where they could be targeted. I believe one of them was targeted by a shower head. Somebody ripped a shower head off and targeted somebody in the shower, and a cellmate was targeted in his cell as well, I believe. This is what will happen, ladies and gentlemen. You're an enemy of the state. They will do anything to try and terrorize you. This is a terror campaign. It's a terror government. And Plaid Cymru want to make it so much fucking worse.
Both got put away for the riots. Both been put in the same prison. Both been put in the same cell. In the last 48 hours, the wing that they put them on was 90% Muslim. Both of them, one's been attacked in the shower. They took the shower heads off, battered him. When he managed to get back to his cell, his other mate had been completely battered as well. The family's obviously distraught and everything. They're making targets of them, as well as examples of them. They're making targets of the lads. They did some.
Now, this is a scary thing, right? Not just the actual incident itself, but obviously this is just audio. And the person who posted this, you'll find it down below, ladies and gentlemen, the X post in particular. People have seemed to try and corroborate this, right? But not saying anywhere where it is from. right, where the actual audio is from. And this brings up another thing. With AI and with all of these advancements in technology and stuff like that, it's going to be very hard to discern what's fake and what's not at this point. If they hadn't brought up the families and stuff like that, and you can go get testimony from the families that, yes, this is what happened, you can corroborate this. I haven't seen anybody do that as of yet. But this is terrifying as well. When you see things come out and it's just an audio, it's just a waveform on a screen. AI, Matt Walsh mentioned it recently, because AI can fake things now and create things so well that it's going to be impossible to determine fiction from reality in the near future. I know that's going to be very, very scary indeed, because we've seen how it'll be used to fabricate stories against people. It'll be used to fabricate stories against the left's political opponents. They'll use it to fabricate stories against political opponents. Odds are people on the right will as well. So people on the very fringes of the right will as well. You know, it's going to be very, very difficult to discern what is true. One of the things I do believe we have good reason to believe, however, is not just that these people were sacrificed in prison, is that, as I mentioned, no borders where there is suffering. Well, there's going to be a lot of suffering if this was allowed to come to the UK, ladies and gentlemen, as French police discover a hidden cache of firearms in a migrant camp near Calais, with fears it could bring increased violence to the UK. As I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you think that these people coming across now are anything more than a foreign political enforcement arm, an imported political enforcement arm that's going to be used by the state, if you don't think these are the UN's peacekeeper troops, right, that are going to be armed to keep native populations in check, right, like something out of the fucking Hunger Games, right? If you don't think that's the case, I don't know what to tell you at this point. Here's Patrick Christie reporting.
We start this hour with some breaking news. I can reveal that French police have just discovered a huge cache of weapons in a migrant camp near Calais. It's this camp, you might recognise it. You are a human trafficker, aren't you?
Are there?
Yes. Why are you bringing people illegally to Britain?
Go.
Why are you illegally bringing people into Britain? Do you feel any kind of conscience about that at all? Do you feel bad about that at all? Or not? No.
I'm just going to mute him a minute whilst I say something. Why do people think that we are going to be enriched by these people? Why do we think that they have anything to add to our communities when they were perfectly fine as it was?
Anyway, police found more than a dozen firearms today, and what they are also describing as, and I'm quoting French police here, weapons of war. So it turns out that people had buried guns there. The cops got a tip-off, and 250 French police officers went in today and got them. But I know what you're all thinking. Surely the French have now cleared this camp. Nope. Have they put a fence around it to stop anyone coming or going? No. But don't worry, because if any of these militants decide to come to Britain, this Labour government will sort them out. This week, the government celebrated sending a handful of illegal migrants back to France.
It's about 19, by the way. At least as far as I know. It was about 19 people. So you said there, about a dozen weapons and what's been termed weapons of war. So what are they going to be? What are we talking? Not just like AK-47s and M16s and whatever else, or M4s, all these other things. What are we talking? Freaking RPGs? Grenades? Mortars? What fucking things are we talking? Artillery guns? Nuclear bombs? Probably not, obviously. I'm being hyperbolic. But again, this thing, thank God the fucking French authorities seized them. But again, you gotta think, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a big fucking wall, between all of the nations of Europe, maybe not a literal one, but strong border controls between all of the fucking nations, maybe you wouldn't have stockpiles of weapons right on our fucking border, ready to come to the UK. I think back, you see a lot of the people in the hotels, they openly shared on their social media networks that when they're out in Pakistan and all these other Middle Eastern countries or whatever, or Asian countries, whatever term you want to use, that they were holding guns and seemingly pledging some kind of, not necessarily allegiance, but in what we can only term as like some kind of, show of strength, if you will. Further to this story, ladies and gentlemen, or rather, this came before the news that the weapons were found. There's suspected UK-trained Afghan special forces operatives now working as people smugglers. So hang on. We have thousands of migrants coming in every month. 1,000 came in a single day a few days ago. We have We have weapons being found in Calais, in these camps, weapons of war, and then you find out that potentially Afghan special forces operatives are aiding in these people smuggling, human trafficking operations. Is it not clear yet? That's what, again, I'm not having a go at you, the viewer who already understands what's going on. But again, to a lot of people, I don't understand how you can just not see it at this point. I have to wonder how much of it is just not being able to see it, how much of it is not wanting to see it. And it's that not wanting to see it, not wanting to face reality that's putting all of us in danger, ladies and gentlemen. Here's Patrick Christie's reporting again.
Come along. So, 35,000 illegal migrants have crossed the English Channel under Sir Keir Starmer's government. And the breaking news tonight is that 1,000 people, 1,000, crossed today alone. But I actually have some more breaking news for you. I can exclusively reveal shocking, unseen footage of human traffickers operating on social media. One of them posted this video yesterday, which appears to suggest that he was in the Afghan Special Forces.
So for those who are listening, not watching, guy's wearing an Afghan flag, and I'm going to pause it a moment. He is dressed head to toe in body armor, like tactical gear. He has an insignia on his chest that is the Afghan flag, multiple patches, right, on his shoulder, magazine pouches, the lot, camo gear, a mount on his helmet for what appears to be night vision, what appears to be goggles, and a covering on his face that's in the shape or has a design of a skull on it. Quite clearly, what you think is a militant, at the very least, associated with the Afghanis based on the flags and the insignia. This is terrifying. This is absolutely terrifying.
Now, what you're looking at on your screens right now are pictures that they posted with guns and wads of cash. Can we keep that on the screen for a second? Because the uniform that that man was wearing in that video is actually the same uniform that was posted in news articles about UK special forces training Afghan special forces. So can you imagine, seriously, if it turns out that this guy is a UK-trained member of the Afghan special forces who is now a human trafficker? There are also worrying pictures as well.
Diversity is our strength, ladies and gentlemen. Diversity is our greatest strength. There's another one here of the guy, one of the guys doing a gesture of some kind. Bear with me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Doing a gesture of some kind that I've got. Patrick Christie actually describes it. But in this gesture, something to do with the Islamist finger point or something like that. That's to do with terror groups and stuff like that. It should be nowhere near, but this is what you get when you don't have borders, ladies and gentlemen. This is what you get from Open Border Society, right? Open Borders Foundation and all the rest of it. Pardon me. If you don't want more of it, ladies and gentlemen, you know exactly who to be in opposition to. Welcome to the team. Welcome to the team. But don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. We might have Afghani special forces, helping out with this. They might have weapons ready to come over to the UK, right? Might already be doing heinous crimes to kids and all the rest of it and costing the taxpayer hundreds of millions every day, month, year, whatever. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. We only had 35,000 or so come over since the start of Keir Starmer's administration, since the start of Keir Starmer's government. They sent 19 home. Rest assured, they've got it under control. And if you don't want this, ladies and gentlemen, you don't want more of this, right? Because you're seeing it all across the UK now and all across the Western world. If you don't want more of this, ladies and gentlemen, you know exactly who to be in opposition to you. You'd be forgiven, ladies and gentlemen, watching this video for thinking this is somewhere in Asia, somewhere in the Middle East or wherever, right? You'd be forgiven for thinking that. You'd be forgiven for thinking that. This is King's College, London. This is King's fucking College in London, where you have a bunch of people, many of whom seem to be of foreign origin, led by, again, a hyper empathetic to the rest of the world, other than the once great nation that she is residing in, liberal female at the head of it, saying, long live the Intifada revolution. Ask yourself, ladies and gentlemen, do you honestly want this on your streets? I think you will agree with me when we say the answer is no. That's enough of that. I'm more than happy. I think one thing we could do is give these people, I'm happy to use the government to fund it, but again, it's not necessarily my money, so I can't necessarily be the judge of that. But I think most people would be happy if these people were to be given a one-way ticket, renouncing their citizenship and all the rest of it, renouncing their passport, renouncing any claim to this land or whatever, to be sent to Gaza, and they would be they would actually be, accepted into the society as a one-way ticket, right? How many of them do you think would accept it? I'd be happy to send them. I'd be happy to send them, right? How many do you think would be happy to accept that deal? None of them. It's a bit like Patrick Bet David when he was on Surrounded, or the Jubilee program, whatever it was, a little while ago. And the communists that were on there, he offered to send one of them a one-way ticket, renounce your American citizenship, and I'll give you a certain amount of spending money even to whatever communist country you choose, and I'll pay for it today. Funnily enough, none of them took him up on the offer. Funny how that works, isn't it? Funny how this stuff happens in, the greatest countries in the world, or at least what once was one of the greatest countries in the world. And some of the greatest people ever to have graced this world, for all of the things that people across the world say about them. More from this conference, however, is Sioned Williams got up on stage to speak, ladies and gentlemen, putting again the full internationalist, globalist campaign on full display. Ladies and gentlemen. And she says, calls to reopen the coal mines are driven by a desire to scapegoat migrants, is what she's apparently said. Plaid Sioned Williams fired an absurd attack at reform at this conference, saying there's policies to reopen coal mines and blast furnaces, the things that would actually make energy a little bit cheaper, allow us to actually make things, so we didn't have to rely on imports from China who are burning coal like there's no tomorrow, right? Would actually give us something that maybe we can export and some industrial capacity, right? Some independence, some jobs, driven by a desire to scapegoat immigrants or scapegoat migrants. So everything at this point is migrant. It shows you exactly where these people's true intentions are, ladies and gentlemen, that they cannot even talk about industrializing Wales, right? A policy to industrialize Wales that in theory would create cheaper energy and create more jobs for people. Right? Regardless if you think the coal mine should be open or not, regardless if you think the blast furnaces should be reopened or not, and how, no, we want to have control of it, we don't want Westminster to have control of it or whatever, whatever gripes people may have, just because it's reform, and reform obviously then tied to Westminster and all the rest of it, right? Surely it's not something that's necessarily related to immigration. But these people can't help but make everything about immigration, and make everything about open borders, and make everything about the open society. Shows you exactly where they know their bread is butter, shows you exactly how they think, and they will destroy Wales. They will destroy Wales and its people. Cannot be allowed to happen, ladies and gentlemen.
With its slew of easy and often nonsensical answers, opening coal mines, relighting closed blast furnaces, driven by a desire to scapegoat immigrants and minorities, backed by external sinister actors, and receiving little scrutiny from a supine media.
Wow, it is always what they accuse you of, ladies and gentlemen. Now, admittedly, this is obviously a very short clip, right? I don't understand what opening the blast furnaces has to do with scapegoating migrants for anything. It's just give people jobs that they can actually provide for their families, right? Sinister, backed by external, sinister actors and receiving little scrutiny from a supine media. If that isn't how BBC and all the rest of them treat Plaid Cymru and Labour in this country, I have no idea what is. If that isn't a really shocking admission of they are everything they accuse you of, right? Because the media in this country looks for every opportunity to attack reform, it seems. And I'm no fan of reform, as you know. But actually, one thing did come from recently, so I'll bring this up now. I'll see if I can find the clip of ostensibly a journalist in Wales. Nigel Farage has been in Wales recently. I believe he's been in Caerphilly for an event recently. But Connor Gogarty, who's an investigations editor at Wales Online, right? Apparent Specialist Journalist of the Year and Scoop of the Year at 24 UK Regional Press Awards, right? Asked Nigel Farage why his party has been calling Wales's nation of sanctuary policy a waste of 55 million on asylum seekers, given that more than 45 million has gone towards helping Ukrainian refugees. But watch how Nigel answers. First off, I think it's an okay answer. No, I would argue that, yes, the nation of sanctuary is an absolute waste of money with what it's going to be used for. Right? Because yes, the Ukrainians did need help, admittedly. And you could make the case that, yes, they shouldn't be put in the same box as, say, Syrians and other people from the rest of the world that aren't necessarily fleeing persecution. The Syrians shouldn't they be moving back to their paradise now that Assad is gone? That was the whole reason they had to come here, is because of Bashar al-Assad. Shouldn't they be moving back to their, their lovely paradise now that they've created under Jolani? No, of course not. Why are they still here? But look at how much Connor can't help himself, at least in my opinion, of constantly butting in and not actually allowing Nigel to answer the question. Nigel, in my opinion, is quite infuriating, right? As we'll talk a little bit about later on. We've got a segment to go through where he talked about on a show about digital ID and all the rest of it, but it doesn't really make too much sense in my opinion. But if you ask somebody a question, you have to at least allow them to answer in a capacity, and the minute they say a few syllables, not jump in. Right? Jump in, but you can't help but jump down their throats. This is what apparently passes for journalism nowadays. But again, from a supine media, as Sioned said, from a supine media with little scrutiny, I'll let you be the judge of this, ladies and gentlemen.
You touched on a complaint that has been made by the Ukrainian community in Caerphilly, saying that Reform has been lying about the Nation of Sanctuary program. You said that Ukrainians are a completely different category.
They should be entirely.
And yet 85% of the £55 million that your candidate says has been wasted actually went towards helping Ukrainian refugees, not asylum seekers.
I understand that. And actually, it's completely wrong that they're put into that basket. Completely wrong. The bigger point... Has that
money been wasted? Because the campaign materials...
Well, some of it has. Some of it has.
£51 million wasted.
Well,
85% of that money went towards helping Ukrainian refugees.
It should be in a separate box. No question about it. But is the idea that Wales sells itself as a nation of sanctuary and therefore is a pull factor for people to come to Wales, which will come at great cost to a local community? That's an idea that perhaps people had before they saw the scale of illegal immigration by young men.
Will Reform be looking at those campaign materials, describing it as wasted money, when that money has gone...
Much of it was wasted. Too much of it was wasted.
That doesn't strike me as supine media with little scrutiny, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't strike me as supine media with little scrutiny. Again, everything, seemingly, aside from when they say all of the good stuff that they're going to do for people that really don't deserve it, in my opinion, at least coming from people that owe them nothing. The Welsh people, the British people, owe the world nothing. They've done tremendous good in the fucking world and have still had some of the bad things that they've done lorded over them for centuries. When we don't do that to other places around the world, are we judging... just the average person, or many people in this area judging the average person that's just walking down the street that may come from one of these areas and still practice slavery? Are most people in Britain judging every, black African by the fact that many areas of Africa still practice slavery? But yet, they say we owe them reparations, as if we were never slaves, when we were, right? Slave comes from Slav, referring to the Slavic people. That's where the word slave comes from. But this is not a supine. They will look for any opportunity to attack reform. There's many journalists, quote unquote, that have the reform's target on their back. In many instances, you could say, rightfully so. Scrutinize it, but then you can't say that there's sinister actors from a supine media that doesn't do anything on a conference stage in Swansea, because it's outright not true. Literally, the only pushback I've seen from mainstream media against Plaid recently was when, was it Victoria, Derbyshire? It might have been Victoria, Derbyshire. I might have that wrong, though. It was on a programme. It was on one of the mainstream media programmes, and they were grilling them because under Plaid's policies, Wales would be £1 billion worse off, according to the fiscal Fiscal Something Institute. I can't remember what the actual abbreviation is. The clip is in one of the older episodes. You can go and find it. It's right at the end of one of the other episodes. It's the only time I've seen, right, that Plaid have been taken to task on anything. But you can see it. People are instantly, they're gunning for reform. You see it all over X. You see it all over social media, right? BBC and all the rest of them. They're gunning for them. A lot of people, to myself included, they would see them as nothing more than controlled opposition. Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, it's very confusing when you look at Nigel Farage, for example. I was actually going to talk about this a little bit later, but I'll bring this forward now. Got a good few more things to go through, ladies and gentlemen, so stay tuned. Stay tuned. Nigel Farage recently went on his program on GB News, said that he'd sooner go to prison than have a digital ID, which I commend him for. I commend him for sticking up against digital ID. However, there's something that's very, very confusing, however, and it speaks to the character of Nigel Farage, which people do want to take into account. Namely, how seemingly how vindictive and vengeful and how he isn't able to move past personal grudges that he has, namely with Rupert Lowe, as we'll talk to in a moment. That's why I haven't seen anybody go to like Reform in Wales, for example, and speak to them about how they treated Rupert Lowe, and don't they think that they could do the same to them? You know, we have a Reform MS who I've talked about on the programme before. Laura Ann Jones, I believe it is. She's MS for Reform in the Senate. And I'd love to know if there's anything in the back of her mind thinking that if she was to ever change, if she was to ever go out of lockstep with the dear leader, do you not have any concerns that you could suffer the same treatment as Rupert Lowe just for speaking your mind and speaking honestly? But not only that, it goes deeper than that. It goes deeper to, Lee Anderson with the way that he treated Rupert Lowe, and Rupert Lowe confided in him as a personal friend, and now Rupert Lowe and pull any punches with Lee Anderson and calls him a rat. Calls him a rat because of the situation with Rupert's dog, I believe it was. So I do have concerns. I obviously do have concerns about reform, right? Whether then I would say that they're potentially the least bad of a bad bunch, okay, maybe you can make that, you can probably make that case. Certainly from what I've seen, at least in terms of policy, whether you like the characters or not, at least in terms of certain policies, what they're planning on doing with income tax, raising the income tax ceiling, reindustrialising, etc. Good policies, in my opinion, for the people of Wales. Even if you don't like that, as we've seen with the Abolish Party, with my interview with the Abolish Party, happened a good while ago, towards the start of the year. They'll think that we're going to be independent from England or independent from Westminster. You never get true independence, really, because we're landlocked together. And really, in many ways, you have to understand it if, at least the way I see it, and this is how it's been since, how long has it been since Wales had a king, for example? Just with the vast increase in size in terms of landmass and population in England, you got to think, if they wanted to take over this country, they probably could if they wanted to, right? Don't they just come over here and slaughter all of us and make it just an extended county of England, right? They probably could if they wanted to. It has been done for a long time. When was the last time you saw an actual King of Wales? The Prince of Wales is an Englishman, right? It's an English title in the British monarchy, right? Now, I'm not necessarily saying that us being united with England under the blanket of Britain, right, and under the British Empire, colonised a quarter of the fucking world, that's a pretty good thing. My opinion, with the technological advancements and the civilization we brought to many areas of the world that wasn't there in the first place and have devolved since then. We were great under the banner of Britain. Under our own separate banners, you could argue that we, didn't have as much going on, and we were just fighting within ourselves. And Wales didn't really have any independence at that point anyway. The last time we had a king was hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And with just the difference in population, like I said, let's assume a 50-50 split between men and women. That means there's about 1.5, 1.6 million men in Wales right now. Last population, obviously, you've got to take into account the mass immigration and stuff like that. But say you go to a population of England, I think back in the 40s or in the I can't remember if it was Britain or if it was England as a whole. Say it's about, I see some people talking about taking back the population to about 40 million of just native British people, right? And say that was half men, half women. That's 20 million. 20 million versus 1.5, there's no way you're going to survive. And that's something which people, I think, are just going to have to accept. Maybe people have better political solutions. Maybe you have better ways that you can see this. But again, you can't help but think that at least with just the numbers of population, right, and the amount of military force you get with that population, right, they could crush us if they wanted to. It's kind of nice that they don't. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent. It's a bit of a tangent. I understand it's not the most nationalist Wales sentiment of the way most people think about nationalism. That's why I think most nationalists are saying now, if you look at Josh Fernie and John Carr, for example, Josh Fernie openly said, when we were separate nations, we were just infighting between each other, our sister nations. When we were united under the same banner, we conquered a quarter of the world. That's why I think true nationalists should want to unite, regardless of the petty differences, especially when the common threat we have at the moment is our own governments and mass immigration and bringing hostile cultures in via mass immigration. That's definitely a united battle that we have. One united battle that we definitely do have in that regard is digital ID. Here's Nigel Farage's remarks on it.
To ID cards. Here was the Prime Minister launching digital ID.
I'm announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work. The rule will be that you can't work if you don't have digital ID. And the reason for that is that too many people are working illegally. Clear, you must have ID, mandatory digital ID in order to work, because we have to stop illegal working.
That is our totally and utterly dishonest Prime Minister at every single level. If you are a foreign worker in Britain, you already have to show a form of digital ID as a foreign worker to your employer on your phone. There is a code you have to apply for, and he, if they're employing you, legally have to ask for it. So we're told that's why we've got to have it. Yet already we have HMRC saying this is wonderful, it'll pave the way for £600 million of tax grab we can take from people. And before you know it, you'll have all your medical records on there. If you're not jabbed, because the government thinks you should be, you'll find yourself genuinely a second-class citizen. I think the whole thing is appalling. I will not be having digital ID. Put me in prison, not a problem. I will not be having digital ID, and I really mean it. Quasi.
So, a lot of good points there. He's saying they already have to show digital ID. Not to mention, you could solve the problem tomorrow by stopping people from coming here and removing the ones that are already here. You could solve much of the problem tomorrow. You don't need digital ID to do that, at least for the rest of the population. They already have some form of digital ID, these people. I don't know, the American example of the CBP One app, for example, where they had the app made in America where they could, have their quote-unquote asylum claims or whatever seen through an app or whatever. J.D. Vance was talking about it a good while ago. I believe before Trump became president, he was talking about it quite heavily. So, there's many different ways you could do it without actually enforcing this on the rest of the population. So you're seeing it's tax grab, it's for digital surveillance, it's for social credit system, right? Because they want to make us more into a state like China. They want to enslave us and make us more into a state like China and have us slaves to the system. That's exactly what they want. And Nigel Farage is right to call it out. However, one thing that is particularly troubling is that somebody in Parliament, Nigel Farage knows extremely well, and the guys at Reform know extremely well, has passed a motion, or submitted a parliamentary motion, opposing digital ID. His name is Rupert Lowe. And I'm actually going to bring this up on screen for you so we can read it together. Rupert Lowe submitted this motion to Parliament very recently, outlining his opposition to digital ID. And many people have since signed on to it, which I'll go over in a moment. But here is the actual motion that Rupert Lowe submitted. Ladies and gentlemen, let's read it together. This House expresses grave concern at the government's plans to introduce a compulsory UK-wide digital identity scheme, notes that such a system would represent an unprecedented expansion of state surveillance over law-abiding citizens, granting government departments and potentially private contractors access to a centralised database of personal data, believes that compulsory digital ID will do little to deter illegal working or illegal immigration, since those breaking immigration law will simply avoid compliance, kind of obvious, while the law-abiding majority will face greater intrusion, bureaucratic hassle, and risk of data breaches. I believe, by the way, based on what some people have said, this system has already been breached twice from what I've heard. there you go. So it could, data breaches warns that such a scheme would create a papers please culture and a two-tier society. It'll be a QR code please culture, where those without smartphones or digital access are unfairly penalised. Pardon me. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. You already have a driver's license. You already have a passport. You already have a birth certificate. What else do you need? And therefore calls on the government to abandon plans for mandatory digital ID scheme and instead focus on practical enforcement of existing immigration and employment laws, mainly mass deportations. Not going to happen, obviously. Government's not going to do that one because they would lose the vote to bloc they've cultivated for a long time. That obviously extends into legal immigration as well. But Rupert Lowe also penned a letter to all of the parties. It's a cross-party letter that he penned, which I'll bring up on screen for you now as well, to the Prime Minister, again voicing opposition to the reported plans for digital ID. And we're going to read that one now. We're going to see the signatories to it. And you'll notice here there's an absence of a few names in particular. See if you notice them. So this is the letter, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to read it all, but I'm going to paraphrase it and bring it up on screen so you can pause the video if you want and you can read it in its entirety. Dear Prime Minister, we are writing to register our profound and passionate opposition to your reported plans for a compulsory UK-wide digital identity scheme. Such a policy would represent an unprecedented level of state control over British citizens. This is a fundamental change to the relationship between the individual and the state. Yes, absolutely. Skipping down a few lines now, we urge you to abandon these plans immediately. At the very least, you must commit to Try that again. At the very least, you must commit to bringing any proposal before Parliament for full scrutiny and a free vote, and to fully consulting the British public before attempting to impose such a drastic measure on a reluctant country. Very reluctant. Very, very reluctant. So, we will oppose it at every stage, and he signs it off. There's many signatories to this letter. I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 at time of writing, or time of this being posted. It was posted a little while ago, so it might have been updated since then. And if I'm wrong about this, then obviously you can leave it down in the comments, right? If you have an updated source or whatever, please leave it down in the comments. Rupert Lowe, James McMurdoch, Jim Shannon, Adnan Hussain, Patrick Spencer, Bradley Thomas, Ayub Khan, Andrew Rossendale, Gavin Williamson, Peter Bedford, Alex Easton, Bob Blackman, and Lewis Cocking. All MPs that have signed on to this letter opposing digital ID. Whose name do you see as absent, ladies and gentlemen? Nigel Farage, Lee Anderson, all these other names of the Reform MPs in Parliament. Those are the only two that I can really think of at this moment in time. Here you go. Rupert Lowe, even in the comments, when somebody asked about Lee Anderson not signing on to it, even said, despite everything, I would welcome Anderson's support. This is bigger than all of us. Why haven't they signed on? We are all told at the moment, and I can see where people are coming from when they say this, if you don't want more of the same, right, vote Reform, because otherwise you're just going to get Tory or Labour next, and you're going to ruin it. If you vote for anyone else, you're just going to ruin it, right? Even though I don't see Reform as really as a viable alternative, at least on a British scale, right? Whether they're going to do actual good in Wales, based on what we've had the last 26, 27 years, or however long devolution has been, right? It was just before I was born that devolution came in. We were told that, we need to put aside our personal grievances and get reforming, because then maybe we can actually enact some legislative changes. And who knows, maybe Nigel Farage has capitulated so much because he'll get in on the vote and then, boom, pull a 180 and he'll actually be the most populist nationalist leader we've ever seen. I don't know. I'm highly sceptical, given the fact that obviously when UKIP, which he was leading at the time, got Brexit done, in what in theory was a crowning moment of victory, he resigned as leader of the party. So again, a lot of people saying that he's just pure containment, and I understand why, and I'm quite sympathetic to that viewpoint. So when you see his colleague here, even though they have personal beef or whatever, it's his colleague, right? They're fellow members of Parliament, even if now they're in opposite parties, because Rupert Lowe's an independent. Won't sign the motion, or won't sign on to the letter of support opposing digital ID, calling for it to at least be brought in for a full vote of scrutiny. Why? You can't put aside your personal grievances to sign support for this? But yet we're expected, the people, are expected to put aside our grievances with Reform to get them in under the promises. Lots of governments and lots of candidates have made promises that haven't been fulfilled. If you aren't willing to put aside your personal grievances and lead by example, why should we trust you? Why should we trust you? So again, that's very disconcerting, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that you see he'll go to prison. He'll go to prison for it, right? But he won't sign a letter for it. Very, very weird. Very, very weird, ladies and gentlemen. But I think that's just the lengths you'll go to not be seen as, even though you can argue it's been seen as weak and all manner of other things anyway, right? But think about it. Why is all of this necessary? It's necessary because of the open borders. It's necessary because of the totalitarian control that Plaid absolutely want. All of this, we've spent over an hour and 20 minutes in this, just linking back to Plaid's conference, even though there's many other things that could be, tied in with it, if you will. Do you know why people are so opposed to Nation of Sanctuary, to all of these other things, all of these globalist initiatives? Because they've seen how it's manifested in England, and they've seen how it's ruined their communities, their towns, their cities, right? We don't want to be ethnically cleansed from our own country. We have nowhere else to go. We have nowhere else to go. And you have no right to give our country and our people, and make our people suffer in this way for your own political gain. DJE Media recently posted this, for example. We don't want things like this in our communities, ladies and gentlemen. Sadly, people just across in our sister nation of England are already going through this. Manchester being a big one. There's a Muslim gang war that recently erupted in Manchester, it seems, ladies and gentlemen, as footage recently just emerged. I'll just put this up on screen. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll commentate over it. I won't play it with the volume. I'll commentate over it. In fact, I'll have it on a low volume so that it can just be in the background. But I got a feeling the audio improvement software will just drown it out anyway. This is UK. The YOOKAY aesthetic manifesting on the streets of Manchester, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly what people don't want, and this is what will happen if Plaid get their way. So you can see here, ladies and gentlemen, there's a bunch of foreign males, all of them foreign males, hitting each other with planks of wood that are from like the little pallet things which you have deliveries on, throwing them at each other, using them as weapons. Rival groups of foreigners having their little conflict, right? Having their little sectarian disputes on our soil, on the streets of Manchester. Plus, like something you'd see in fucking Karachi or something. This is what you can expect more of. This is what you can expect more of under Plaid's Nation of Sanctuary plans. Right? Where there is suffering, we see no border. How about you put up a border to stop the suffering of the native British people that never ever wanted to be put through this and never ever voted for this? They never voted for foreigners, foreign gangs, gang warfare on their streets. And oftentimes the victims then being their children. As we saw in the instance when one gang, it was a rival Turkish gangs, I believe it was in London, done a drive-by and nearly killed, I think it was a 9-year-old girl who was sat in a cafe with her mother. She's going to be left with permanent cognitive and physical disabilities now, difficulties even, from a bullet that struck her in the head from one of these foreign, there's no words, from these foreign disgusting gangs. We never wanted them to begin with. The government had no right to bring them here. But hey, this is the target voting bloc, ladies and gentlemen. This is the target voter bloc for a treacherous government. Very, very rarely then do they reap the consequences. Very, very rarely do they reap the consequences. But we did have a stark example of one of the politicians reaping what they sow. Having to reap what they sowed. And this is a tragic incident, ladies and gentlemen. It speaks to the mindset of people like Sioned Williams, people like all of the other suicidally empathetic, overbearing mother drive on full display of all of these self-described feminists in the Welsh government, the British government, etc. Sacrificed potentially millions of young girls on the altar of multiculturalism, mind you, because their baby was these globalist initiatives, and that's all they care about taking care of. That's what their nurture instinct has been put towards. That's what they've chosen to put their nurture instinct towards in the name of feminism, in the name of boss babe, in the name of breaking the glass ceiling. Right? Ira Stalzer, Social Democrat mayor from Herdecke, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Germany. This story is a tremendous example. I don't say tremendous as in good. I say tremendous in how well it illustrates exactly when the left's policies come back to bite them. And how this is one example of how, and you could extrapolate that very easily to see how it's affected all of us. The policies that they've implemented encapsulated perfectly in this one instance where it actually did happen to a leftist politician herself. Maya tortured for hours in her basement by her own adopted daughter, according to shocking new details leaked by police. This is from a Remix News, right? Despite reports of brutal torture, in misleading investigators, scrubbing a crime scene, and the near death of her adoptive mother, the adopted 17-year-old daughter will not be arrested. Now, don't notice, ladies and gentlemen, but also notice. This is the, diversity is our strength being brought to bear for this. Again, very sad. We wouldn't have wanted it to go through this, but this is an example of, in this instance, one of the politicians that are forcing this on their people, having to suffer the same consequences. Will she change? I don't know. I honestly don't know. But this information, so she was stabbed, right? The story initially broke because she was stabbed, I believe it was in her own home, right? And there was speculation to who did it. Initially, reports came in that it was a gang of men. That was all that was told. Gang of men. No description. No number, right? No proximate ages. No languages, languages being shouted or anything like that. No reports or anything like that. Just gang of men stabs mayor. Then photos came out of said adoptive daughter being arrested. Or adopted kid it was known at the time. Adopted child it was. It wasn't clear that it was a daughter at the time. As you can tell, she's been kept, visually anonymous, because obviously we protect criminals now. Quite clearly not of German stock. Quite clearly not of German descent. And now it's become clear that it's not just the adopted daughter that stabbed her, but tortured her for many hours in her basement. And then you have the full restorative justice coming in when she will not even be arrested, simply not charged or anything like that. So I don't know whether she's been released, because initially the adopted child was arrested, I believe it was. She was arrested by police, but apparently now it's now come out yesterday that she will not be arrested, so maybe she's been de-arrested, who knows. New information reveals now that her 17-year-old adoptive daughter repeatedly tortured Stalzer for hours, nearly killing her own adoptive mother. So this person who had the kindness to take in this person, offer them a home, offer them a mother figure, for whatever reason with what happened to her previous family, repays her by torturing her in her own basement and stabbing her in her own home, nearly killing her. On October the 7th, fitting date, at 12:05 p.m, Stalzer's daughter called emergency services saying her mother had been attacked by several men, that she was beaten and was barely conscious. I'll bring this article up on screen as well so you can read it as well, ladies and gentlemen. A witness off the street found the politician bleeding in her armchair in the living room. Later, her adoptive daughter told the police that's also how she found her mother. So evidently a complete fucking liar, if this is to be believed. Despite claims of several men torturing her mother, the mother. It turns out this was reportedly an orchestrated lie to cover up the horror that had occurred inside the house. Police have since learned that the mother was subjected to the grueling torture for hours in the basement of the house. The suspect attacked Stalzer with deodorant spray and a lighter, trying to set her hair and clothes on fire. The adopted daughter said she wanted revenge. However, it remains unclear as to what she wanted revenge for. Yeah, what did you want revenge for? This lady, in all her suicidal empathy, took you in and offered you a home, offered you everything. And you repaid her by trying to set her on fucking fire? The adopted daughter also had 2 kitchen knives which he used to stab and slice the politician's body. Stalzer faced critical injuries, including 13 stab wounds. One of the bloody knives was also found in the 15-year-old son's adopted... Oh, there we go. I think that was the son that was initially arrested. Yeah, apparently, in this instance, now she has 2 adopted children, both of which are of similar descent, it seems. Along with the bloody clothing from the daughter, the other knife was also found in his room. Police also found that large traces of blood were scrubbed from the scene, which were later revealed by the police forensics team. Yeah, here you go. Here's the image here, ladies and gentlemen. I'll zoom in a little bit if I can. Here we go. You should be able to see that. Here is the image of the adopted son being arrested, it seems. Still think diversity is our greatest strength, ladies and gentlemen? Stalzer nearly lost her life and was transported to a hospital in Bochum via rescue helicopter. Bild wrote the police sources believe the mother was sitting in her armchair for a long time, bleeding out while the 2 alleged suspects cleaned the house of crime scene evidence. Numerous German media outlets, including Spiegel, also reported that the police were called to the house not so long before the latest attack during the summer. In that case, the daughter was accused of domestic violence and threatening the mother with a knife. Seems that it's, though, a pattern of behaviour. This is what our politicians want for the rest of our communities, it seems. That's the only thing we can really take from this. It's the only thing we can really take from this. Now, of course, they want all the case to go away. They're going to want this case to go away because they want to, again, push this narrative that diversity is our strength and that we're all the same, right? There's nothing, there's no differences. All cultures are equal. All of these things, right? We need to embrace restorative justice and all of these things. There's no words. There's no words. You can't help but feel sorry for her, but at the same time, you also can't feel sorry for her. Because how are you supposed to feel sorry for somebody that would take pride, very likely a refugees welcome, person, multiculturalism, diversity, yeah, far-right racists. And then the thing that apparent far-right racists said would likely happen, happened again, and again, and again. And now it seems as though she's fighting for her life in hospital in something that can only really say was completely preventable. Was completely preventable. But the lies will only continue, ladies and gentlemen. The lies will only continue. Such as the lies put up by the Church of England at the moment. That they are an actual church, right? Despite the fact they let a female archbishop cheer on the destruction of Canterbury Cathedral recently, with the anti-Christian graffiti, cheered it on in the name of inclusion, diversity, etc. That the Dean of Canterbury, who commissioned the internal graffiti in the cathedral, is a homosexual who quote-unquote married his male partner in a church, right? They cheer it on at every single turn. We cheer on our own destruction at every single turn. And now people are getting paid nearly £100,000 to lie about it. GB News reported, Home Office will pay expert £91,000 to help convince Britons, i.e. native Britons, that Labour is stopping the boats. As stuff, ladies and gentlemen, if something is actually happening, do you need to pay somebody £91,000 to convince people that it is? No, of course not. If something's actually happening, people will be able to see it with their own eyes. So they can see the colonisation, right? They can see the colonisation of their homelands. They can see how they're being ethnically cleansed from their homelands. They can see how they're being run over. They can see how they are being erased as a people and as a culture from this only land they have to call home. And they don't need people being paid £91,000 to say that or to put that view forward, because we can see it with our own fucking eyes. No, Labour need to pay somebody £91,000 to convince people because it is exactly a lie. So a communications expert is being offered up to £91,000 a year by the Home Office to help the department prove that Labour is tackling the small boat crisis. A job advertisement for the quote-unquote Deputy Director of Migration Communications says that the applicant should have a resilient mindset and personal authority. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is attempting to show voters that he has a plan to reduce the number of migrants illegally crossing the channel in small boats. A failure to do so failure to lower numbers could prove fatal for our Prime Minister, has repeatedly promised to do so. See, we know that they're not above lying. Digital ID was never in their manifesto. All of the things that they've done was never in their manifesto. Right? So nobody is above lying. In fact, that's all they have. That's all they have, because the thing is, because people want to, because they're good-natured people at heart, they still want to give the politicians the benefit of the doubt. I do. But why should we give Plaid? Why should we give Labour? Why should we give any of these leftist politicians the benefit of the doubt on these things, that they're actually going to solve the concerns of the native people, when they've had what? They've been at the reins now in many capacities for nearly 30 years. If you go back to Tony Blair, if you go back to devolution, right, the problems were building all the way through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s as well. But again, you can go back all the way to end of World War II if you wanted to. But every single politician comes through saying they're going to curb immigration, they're going to stop immigration, they're going to do all of these things. They've never done it. Why should we give you the benefit of the doubt anymore? Why should we think that you're going to allow us to solve these problems politically? Because we know who you're subservient to. We know you're working on behalf of the globalist organizations, the UN, World Economic Forum, etc., right? We know you're doing that, and we know that they want to get rid of any kind of democracy. They want a one-party state all across the fucking world. Why should we give you the benefit of the doubt when we know where your bread is buttered? This is why you have to spend £91,000 of taxpayer fucking money. £91,000 taxpayer fucking money to lie, barefaced lie to the British people. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. Think about it. On Wednesday, which we can only assume based on when this article was written on the 10th. So we can assume that means it was the 8th. On the 8th of October, more than 1,000 migrants arrived on 15 small boats in a 24-hour period. Total number of arrivals since the start of the year, mind you. It's not since the start of Keir Starmer's government, which started back in, July last year. Total number of arrivals since the start of the year to 35,476 alone in illegal boat crossings. Number is up 33% from the same period last year, and equal with the record of year 2022. Record high. More than 100 migrants were gathered on Gravelines Beach in northern France, waiting on the Thursday afternoon, awaiting collection ahead of making the perilous journey. Think about it. You're putting people in danger. You're putting children in danger. Whenever somebody dies in the channel, it is a direct fault of not only of the human traffickers and child traffickers. Many instances, if you listen to people like Tom Homan, who are dealing with these things at the southern border in the US, the horrific stories of children that have been repeatedly raped by these cartels and stuff like that. You're enabling this with your open border policies. When Rhun up Iorweth says he doesn't see fucking borders, he's enabling this. He's not only enabling the takeover of our lands, he's enabling all of these people who may be coming here to seek a better life, right? Who may be coming here to seek a better life, that die in the fucking channel. That's blood on these politicians' hands. Because again, they don't see these people as people. They don't see these people with families and with a homeland to go to and a homeland to make it prosper. They see these people as economic and political units, ladies and gentlemen. Say what you want about nationalists, right, with their nationalist sentiment. And we've got a statement to go over from Steve Laws in a moment, which really puts into contrast, right? He doesn't beat around the bush, what Steve says. He doesn't beat around the bush at all, right? Says it exactly as it is, whether you agree with him or not. But at the very least, when I've spoken to nationalists, you can see that they actually see people as people. They understand these people don't belong here, and we don't want them here. We don't want them here in the numbers that they come here. In many ways, that the people don't want them here at all, right? For whatever reason, because it's our home, and we decide who comes into our home. And we want to keep this home for ourselves. It's the only one we have, and we lose it in a peril. But we understand that we don't want anything to really negatively happen to those people. We want to be able for them to go home and have self-determination in their own homelands, but their home is not here. but they actually see them as people. The left sees these people as political units. The right, in many instances, the nationalists, see these people as actually people, not just their own people either. They might prioritize their own people. They have to. We have to at this point because nobody else will. But at the very least, they see people as people. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Lowe, prominent nationalist, was recently arrested, right? It was part of Homeland, but it now left Homeland a little while ago. Grievances with the leader Kenny Smith, I believe. Founded the Remigration Now initiative, but he spoke at the Patriotic Alternative Conference recently. Now, Patriotic Alternative has had many different, people call it different things, right, over the years. Right, it's been called, fascist, neo-Nazi, etc. I don't know enough about it to say that. But he spoke at the conference recently. A lot of his remarks are probably going to shock you, ladies and gentlemen. It was a 20-odd minute speech. We're not going to go through all of it, right? But it says something very, very interesting at the start of that, right? The start of this thing, which is really how a true nationalist speaks, and really speaks to how they do see these people as people, even if they see that they want to get rid of millions of them because they don't belong here, right, for whatever reason. Have a listen to this, ladies and gentlemen, and let me know what you think. There's a bit here which I'm going to go through in a moment that's very, very important, which I'm going to break down to really highlight this point. But just have a listen to this.
Okay, so can you hear me all right? So I'm assuming most of you guys never thought you'd see me back here, but I am very grateful to be back here. Thanks, Mark, for inviting me back. Looking in front of me right now, this is clearly the largest nationalist organisation in the country. It's not even close. So thank you for having me to speak. Mark's asked me to speak on remigration. I'm assuming most of you guessed that anyway. The Migrant Hunter, thank you for that. Suppose it's quite a classy nickname. At the time I wasn't so keen, but now I was probably leaning into it a little bit. But let me get started. So like the Africans, yes I know, another Martin Luther King quote, like the Africans, I have a dream. But my dream's a little bit better. My dream is to see millions and millions of immigrants removed from our country. Some people may get a little bit uncomfortable when you use this language, but the reality is, without millions of people being removed from this country, we are not going to have a future for our people. Our children are going to grow up as hated minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. I do not care if these people came over illegally, I do not care if they came over legally, I do not care if they were born here, I do not care if their grandparents were born here. These people have to leave. This is not their land, this is ours, and we will not tolerate it.
Check what he said there, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Steve's saying there, he used Martin Luther King as a reference, right? Which is very interesting. And again, playing into the nickname of Migrant Hunter and all of these things, you think very, harsh language, brings up, a lot of people will then instantly be thrown back to visualizations from the 1930s and 40s and so on. But anyway, there was one thing that he said there, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of these people, they tend to be, most people would describe them as anti-Semitic, for example, tend to be quite hostile to the state of Israel, more sympathetic towards the Palestinians, for example. Again, you've seen that kind of horseshoe kind of develop from there, right? But understanding who your own native people are at the very, very heart. But you're seeing that horseshoe kind of manifest. But what did he say there, which is quite interesting, ladies and gentlemen, sort of echoes the sentiment that I had in my conversation with Josh Fernie, for example, who's still part of the Homeland Party, is that he said there, our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. Now that's interesting. That's interesting. Not something that you would hear from anybody that's aspiring to, say, be the leader of the Fourth Reich, in my opinion. And again, it echoes the sentiment of, look, we understand, right, the plight of people around the world, and we see these people as people, but this is our home, and politicians have no right to give it away, right? And we do not want these people here. As said, millions and millions of millions of people who never ever should have been allowed here have come into the country via legal and illegal means. I say legal with massive, again, every time I say legal now, ladies and gentlemen, think of the massive inverted commas instantly around it, right? Because what the politicians have done with the system is completely illegal. And how they've weaponized it, and how they didn't keep to their campaign promises at the very least. But there you're seeing it. There, actually seemingly echoing some concern that if we don't do something, and like a snowball rolling down a hill, ladies and gentlemen, picking up more snow and getting bigger and faster as it goes along and more destructive. If our politicians way back when, in the 70s, 80s, 60s, had nipped this problem in the bud and stopped it dead, right, we wouldn't be having this conversation. We wouldn't be having this conversation. We need to have this conversation now, and we need to enact these measures now because of how far the problem has progressed. So, like, again, now, when you had a snowball that started to roll down the hill, if you stop the snowball when it's nice and small, it's very easy to stop. Now we have this massive cascading boulder that's like a big tsunami wave that's coming down towards our communities, and it's been pillaging our communities for generations, right? Because our politicians, in not many instances, have actively done anything about it, but actively demonized people for being opposed to it, and have actively furthered these agendas in opposition to the native British people. Now we need more drastic means. Now we need more drastic means. And typically, when you start getting more and more and more and more into the extremes, you start looking at more and more violent and forceful means. That's just the reality, and none of us like it. None of us like it. And Steve says openly later on in this speech, in the next couple of minutes or so, it says that, look, it's not going to be all kumbaya, everybody's going to come to some big understanding and they're all going to get back on the planes and boats and whatever and go back to wherever they come from willingly. A lot of them are going to do it unwillingly, and it's going to be, and he actually uses the phrase, by any means necessary, which obviously is very concerning, but it's just a mark of how big the problem has gotten. It's a mark of how big the problem has gotten, and the fact that we now need more and more drastic solutions to solve it, or more and more forceful solutions, if you will, to solve it. Because this is now a war for our very existence, ladies and gentlemen. And many of the people who've come here, both through legal and illegal means, openly say they're coming here to take us over. And they're happy that we are losing our home. They're happy that we are genociding ourselves and being replaced in our own home. They're exceedingly happy about it. They see it as revenge. They see it as justice and whatever. And we cannot stand for that. We will die as a people if we don't do anything. Make no mistake, and it could be as soon as the next generation even. But what you see there, ladies and gentlemen, is there's still not an inherent hatred for everybody else around the world. And he says this, and he says, our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. So you see there, he doesn't want his children seemingly to grow up hating people just for whatever reason. But what you're now seeing, ladies and gentlemen, and this was encapsulated perfectly with the attitudes embodied in a Stephen Crowder clip that happened recently when he went into the barbershop and spoke to a bunch of black men. And they're saying they're pro-reparations and all of this stuff, right? And how they're, again, taking up a lot of this stuff and hold racial grievances against people for things that they never did, right? Everything that's being done in the name of racial justice, in the name of multiculturalism, in diversity, equity, and inclusion, is breeding the most radical right wing. And in many instances, people who would take me, for example. I'm not saying that I actually am, right? But many instances now where people's perspectives have drastically changed. And in Stephen's case, he was observing that many of the people he was seeing now that were not like it before are actually turning racist because they're seeing how much the system is being weaponized against them unfairly for things that they never do, for policies that they never asked for people that this is not their home. In our case, this is where we are distinct from America. But you're seeing there, there's an interesting line right there. Our children are going to grow up hating minorities, and that to me is unacceptable. That's what I think. A lot of the people, they don't understand. They don't necessarily on the fringe right, if you will. It's some of them, at least. Nationalists who are unapologetic about being nationalists. They don't necessarily hate anybody for who they are, for where they come from. They hate the fact that their people are being systematically eliminated, systematically ethnically cleansed from their cities, that they're being colonized, that their country is being turned into a foreign country, and they know exactly what happens to minorities in other areas of the world where these people come from. Again, ladies and gentlemen, right there, if you're looking on screen, right there. That's what we stand to gain, right? That right there. Many instances it already has happened to our women and children. It only stands to get worse unless we do anything. But it's interesting. Contrast that right there with what you heard from Rhun up Iorweth. And the contrast couldn't be more clear. Part of the message to you for this episode is this, ladies and gentlemen. Plaid are not nationalists. They say so themselves. They're internationalists. They're focused on everybody but you. They're focused on everybody but you. the Welsh person. You need to understand that. I think the only way we're going to get out of this, ladies and gentlemen, with the next election that's coming up in Wales next year, it needs to be too big to rig. You saw that's what worked in America, too big to rig. And Democrats tried to do everything they possibly fucking could to rig that election. All right? We need to make it too big to rig because they're going to try and form a coalition to, for example, keep Reform out. And I do think, at the very least, in this instance, Reform are going to be the best of a bad bunch. The best of a bad bunch. And with so little time, I dare say we're going to have to try and get more people out. I'm not committing to this yet, but we're going to have to try and get more people out to potentially vote for them and support them at the very least, because they are at least maybe a stepping stone towards a better future for Wales. Or maybe, if you want to go down the Welsh independence route, maybe we can have a look at other Welsh independence parties, like Gwlad, for example, who seem to not be going along with the same globalist framework and actually seemingly want to be putting the people of Wales first in a kind of more separatist format. So maybe something we can explore as well. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. But it needs to be too big to rig. And it needs to be too big to the point that the coalition is not going to win out. Right? The coalition is, any coalition they were going to make wouldn't even be able to compete with the amount of turnout in opposition to these globalists that want to sacrifice you and your future generations, your entire country, and all your lineage on the altar of diversity, multiculturalism, and colonization, and your replacement. And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you found it useful. I want to say that you enjoyed it. There's not really much that we can enjoy, really, about talking about things like this, but it's important to go over. Thank you very much. As I said, have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. You take care now. Godspeed.